So, hello and welcome, Karzan. I'm very happy to have you here and very happy to have you actually as a first guest. And you're somebody who has very interesting background in athletics. Could you tell me more about this? What's the sport that you have been doing and what brought you to this?
Yeah, well, it's honestly a pleasure to be here, Silja. And the sport that I'm really passionate about is horse riding. And so my background is in equestrian sports. I am a certified holobody coach, which is how we
Hmm.
obviously connected. And as part of my coaching niche, what I'm really specializing in is total health transformation in horse riders, but also seeing myself as somebody who can pave the way and lead the way in terms of equestrian fitness and also tapping into those other aspects of our health that are so important for us, not just to be really effective horse riders and compassionate horsemen for our horses, but also allowing us to unlock those deeper levels of health that support our lifestyles.
Hmm. So, how long have you been riding yourself?
So, interestingly, I've only been riding for nearly 4 years now. I
Hmm.
actually came to horse riding quite late. So, the first time I ever sat on a horse, I was 26.
Wow.
And I actually was on holiday in Spain. We went up to the mountains in the northern region of Madrid. And that was when I first had my real horse experience. And
Hmm.
it just completely transformed my life. And when I came back to the UK, we started having I started having horse riding lessons, and
Wow.
then everything just escalated from there. I ended up with my own horse, who was B. She's 11 now, and I've actually got a young horse, Lily, and she's 5. So,
Hmm.
um, quite quickly, I'd sort of gone from having lessons in the riding school with 5, 6, 7-year-old kids, and just being this like guy who was also
Oh,
learning to ride, and then 6 months later, having my own horse to also learn and share this journey with.
wow. So how did it feel like to be in riding school with all these children?
I think, I mean, it felt sometimes a little bit silly, and I think uh, one of the things that I've really sometimes struggled with was wishing that I had started to learn to ride at a younger age or an earlier
Mm,
age. But I also think that coming to it at a late age meant that I could understand a lot of the concepts much more clearly. And
mm,
so if somebody says to you, try this or try that, then I'm already in that position to be able to process everything that's going on, not just with my body and figuring out what's going on with the horse, and then being able to find ways to solve those problems. Where I think certainly, as when you're much younger and as a child, I don't think you necessarily have that same ability to do that. So I think there's definitely advantages and disadvantages to coming into equestrian sport at a later
mm,
age. And what I've found myself is that actually age is not a barrier. And if you look at some of the masters in the sports, whether that's, say, somebody like Carl Hester, who's a famous dressage rider, Great British dressage rider, or one of the classical masters like Nuno Oliveira, they are riding well into their older age and
wow.
only ever getting better.
Mm,
So, there's this kind of quote that I think it was Nuno who said that it takes a lifetime and a half to learn how to ride.
wow. And the good thing is that you started. It's like you're not letting anything stop you. I think this is so amazing. And it's like, would you also say that as you like understood some concepts like maybe more easily as an adult? Was it also like faster to learn?
Um, I think learning is so is quite complex, and I think there's a lot of nuances, especially in the sport, because yes, you have to learn as a rider, and there's lots of different components to that. There is like your physical ability, as well as your ability to problem solve on the horse whilst you're actually riding.
Mm.
And then there's also the horse component as well, and it depends how well schooled your horse is, whether it's a young horse, an older horse, a been there and done that horse. Is it a schoolmaster, or is it a horse that still has a lot of learning to do itself? So
Mm.
there are so many different components to it that that whole process of learning to ride isn't necessarily linear.
Mm. Wow. And it also sounds, one thing that I heard there was like, okay, there's this horse component. So it also means that you have to be able to communicate with the horse properly. Can you tell me a little bit more about the communication with the horse? It's like how comfortable you feel and how it's done, how you communicate with the horse.
Yeah.
What are the
So
tools?
yeah, and I mean, you've got to remember, like, the horse has been around for thousands and thousands of years. It's actually, they the horse has roamed, and they are free spirits at the end of the day. And so actually they're very, very sensitive and intuitive animals. They can
Mm.
feel a fly on them. And so actually when you think about the amount of pressure that they can sense, they don't require a lot of pressure at all. And
Mm.
so when you are riding them, actually your role as a rider is to be as quiet as possible, because actually they are very in tune.
Mm.
And so typically you're riding from your seat, and you're also using your leg aids as well. And so depending
Mm.
on how much pressure you use with your legs or where you put your legs, that will be certain cues for the horse to move in a certain way or move in a certain direction in order to
Mm.
go from A to B.
Wow. It sounds like, yeah, so many different details to keep in mind. But I think you also had like some kind of muscle memory when you start doing it, right? It's like with any other sport, some movements just become so automatic, and you don't have to think about them anymore.
Yeah, and I think this is it. And I have always been somebody who has been reasonably fit. But I became really passionate in equestrian fitness, and I sort of thought to myself, well, there must be a way of being able to improve my riding without having to be on the horse. So I really started to look at all of the off horse and the non-riding exercises that I could do in
Mm.
order to improve and take myself sort of up the levels and understand the movements that are required of a rider to be more effective.
Mm.
And I'd previously come from a gym background. Like, I did a lot of weight training in my sort of university years and then in my early 20s. And so I had a very good understanding of training in the gym. But what
Wow.
I found was that all of that weight training had actually made me really, really stiff. And also, having a desk job where I worked in the hospital for a number of years, um, it and being sat down all the time is terrible for your muscles, like your hip flexors. Your pelvis gets very locked because it's not able to move as efficiently as possible. And so I went down this like rabbit hole of understanding what equestrian fitness is, and how important it is to look after your body so that
Mm.
you have, say, the strength, but you're also quiet when you ride, and having that mobility and that
Mm.
flexibility to be able to give very subtle aids on the horse without putting them off balance. Because you
Mm.
got to remember, if you're an unbalanced rider, then the horse is going to be compensating for you. And so the horse is going to be unbalanced as well. And that ultimately is going to affect the whole performance,
Mm.
regardless, depending on whatever you want to do, whether that's show jumping, whether that's dressage, whether that's cross country or equitation.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, the horse always has to be in balance, and the best way you can put a horse in balance is by having a balanced rider.
Hmm. So what kind of riding do you actually do?
So I love dressage. It really suits my personality, I think.
Hmm.
I because I
So
would
what
describe,
kind of personality do you need for this?
well, I
Explain.
it's very precise. It's very
Ah.
precise. It's also incredibly artistic as well, and
Hmm.
I see myself as a creative. And at the end of the day, like dressage is a dance, is a dance with your partner,
Hmm.
and it's basically where you perform a test and you run through very specific movements.
Mm-hmm.
But dressage is also very good for the horse, and so it's essentially gymnastics for the horse. And actually,
Wow.
yeah, dressage done well gives horses a lot of longevity.
Ah.
Um, but
Okay.
it requires you to be very precise, because at the end of the
Hmm.
day you're being judged when you do the test. And so I would describe myself as like a recovering perfectionist, but I
Ah.
think the dressage allows me to get my fix
So it's
from
like
that.
you're taking the horse to a gym to into strength training in dressage, and you're like its trainer, and you're like also like given scores based on how you train the horse when it's like I don't know competition or how you call them.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that.
Yeah. Wow. So and you said that you were also like exploring stuff like outside horse riding, like you mentioned flexibility, strength training. So I understand that you have put together like something like very specific for horse riders. So like,
Yeah.
how did you come to this idea? Was it just for your own because of your own need for
So
this?
I think like most things that really take off, it comes from that passion and that curiosity to start with. And so for me, I had that curiosity with the equestrian fitness and finding these ways to improve my horse riding without having to ride, 8, 10 horses a day, because
Hmm.
I just didn't have that. And it came from there, and I was just posting a lot of content on social media, really just documenting my own journey. And
Hmm.
people started to take notice, and people would then reach out and say, oh, I've seen your progress, like could you help me with my core stability, or could you help me with something else? And it got to a sort of stage where I thought, actually, I would love to be able to do this and help people and serve people at
Hmm.
a much higher level. And so that's when I started looking at my options of being able to do that. And I knew that I didn't want to go down the personal training route. I would much rather be a coach, and specifically like the health coaching and tapping into mindset and behavior change, because there is so much more to your health than just the movement. It's your nutrition, it's your
Hmm.
stress, it's how well you sleep, it's how well you feel supported and
Yeah.
connected. And bringing actually all of those things together
Hmm.
then helps create that success long
Hmm.
term. And I've kind of like gone off on a bit of a sidetrack, but I'll come back to
Yeah.
the fitness side of things.
Yeah.
With the fitness, I sort of see there being four main components. One of them is having strength, but it's a different kind of strength as being able to like doing a 1 rep max, like your
Hmm.
deadlift or your
Yeah, I guess on a
chest press.
horse, you're like, you also need some endurance.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
exactly. So you need the muscular strength in a sense that you have really good posture, because you don't want to be slumped forward and you don't want to be
Mm,
tipping back. So you want a good really posterior chain where your shoulders are sort of down
mm,
and back and your lats are also engaged. And then also as well that you've got that strength in your legs to be able to support yourself, because ideally you don't want to be resting all your weight on the horse, because you're just going to push them down into the ground. You sort of want to be supporting them as best you can. So you need that strength. You also then need that endurance from both like a muscular perspective in order to be able to ride, say, for 30 to 60 minutes at a time, typically.
Mm.
But then also your cardiovascular endurance as well. So that's really important, so that, if you're getting tired, then you're not going to be able to ride at your best for a long time.
Mm.
And ultimately we are. So having that range, that cardiovascular range is important. And
Mm.
then it's also the mobility in your hips, the mobility in your legs, to be able to give just a subtle aid. You just want to be able to move your leg back slightly, or maybe shift the weight in your seat bones,
Mm-hmm.
which will just give a small cue to the horse to say, we're going in this direction, or this is where I want us to be.
Mm.
And it's a constant rebalance. And so if you haven't got that mobility, or if a body part of you feels very tight or stiff or locked, then that's also going to create like this jarring effect, because at
Mm.
the end of the day, you kind of want to be in this fluid motion with the horse, so that you feeling
Mm.
together and the energy is constantly being recycled and not
Yeah.
lost.
So actually, if you feel tired or if you're like stiff in some area, the horse can sense this, and it's also like harder to lead the horse.
Yeah, exactly that. And the horse is stiff as well. Yeah, the horse,
Mm.
just like us as humans, we're all slightly asymmetrical, and some horses will have that more than others, and some riders will have that asymmetry more than others, particularly if you've had an injury, and maybe you've fallen off and broken something, which is really common in this sport. Like, we fall from quite a height, and so the risk of doing damage to ourselves is really high.
Mm.
um and and so it's about creating that functional symmetry. We're never going to be entirely perfect, but can we move our bodies in a way that allow us to operate, in both directions equally well?
Mm.
And then lastly, the other thing, which is probably one of the most important components of horse riding, is your core stability, because the
Mm-hmm.
more stable you are, the better balance, and the more you can develop your proprioceptive awareness, to understand that, am I sitting straight and am I sitting evenly in the saddle and on the horse, or am I tipping or
Mm.
leaning one way, is so important. And at the end of the day, you're on a moving animal, and so that is constantly
Yeah.
adjusting. You're constantly being thrown off balance, and it's
Mm.
constantly about refinding that center. And
Mm.
if the horse, spooks off in one direction, you want to be able to snap back and readjust yourself as quick as possible, so that you can rebalance yourself and not fall off, but also then rebalance the horse to be able to go and do what it is that you're doing next.
Yeah, it sounds like it's like a lot about balancing.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's the same like as with meditation. The thing is not about just sitting still and not letting your mind wander, but if your mind wanders, the main point is like, okay, you come back. If you go
Mhm.
wandering, you come back. So if you go out of balance, you come back to the balance. So it's like, yeah, like you said, it's a beautiful dance. So actually, as an athlete riding a horse, what are like the main mindset or mental capabilities and characteristics that you would also need to do all this, to keep all this balance and be successful as an equestrian?
I think there's so much mindset involved, and it doesn't matter if you're an amateur rider or a hobby rider or a elite professional. You have probably the same mindset challenges, and also you can experience quite different ones. I think the thing about some of the mindset issues that riders face is that, this isn't a hobby for a lot of people, it's a lifestyle, and
Mm.
you invest so much, not just from a financial perspective, but from an emotional perspective, from a time perspective. the whole blood, sweat, tears thing
Mm.
is never been, more true for equestrians. And,
Wow.
consequently that then creates a lot of pressure,
Mm.
because you got to think that you've invested all of this time, money, energy into a horse, and it could be staked on, 3 minutes in a competition.
Mhm.
And if your expectation, if the reality doesn't go as well as as you'd hoped, then that can sometimes be really, really demoralizing.
Mm.
And you need then a certain level of mental toughness and resilience to be able to bounce back from that. Because at the
Mm.
end of the day, like when a rider competes, they're putting themselves out there to be judged.
Yeah, I think it's I can draw a parallel with my own sport, which right now is bodybuilding and namely bikini fitness. So I
Yeah,
also like work for an entire year. I prepare, I train, I track my calories, uh, study posing, and then it's like just maybe one day, uh, I get like maybe like you 3 minutes on the stage, and
yeah.
then it's like done, and then you start preparing for the next one. So it's like, but I think in this case actually what I have discovered is like you also have to, yeah, like you said, have it as a lifestyle and you have to appreciate the journey and appreciate all the lessons that you learn. For example, I have learned a lot as a fitness athlete. It's like I I always tell people this is it's more than sport. It's also like a way of self
Mm.
growth and self development because you grow so much as a person. Like you said, resilience and all these other mental things. It's like you learn to appreciate the journey, not just this 3 minutes on the stage or 3 minutes at the competition.
Yeah. And I think that is such an important aspect of the mindset. I think it is falling in love with the game, it's falling in love with the process, and realizing that um yeah, that it doesn't always go to plan, and I think if you can just enjoy it, and realize that everybody is in their own lane, and stop comparing yourself to other people, or because I think it's the comparison that often eats away at people. It's you think you should be somewhere, and actually it's not. It's further from it couldn't be any further from the truth. Like, you are
Mm.
on your own journey.
Yeah, it is so much similar to fitness because it's like
Mm.
you also get points, and it's not about what other people are doing. You will always have to like see, oh, how am I better than last time? Have I grown? I don't know how the points are given for horse riding. It's like, is it also like subjective based on the judges' opinions, or is it like very objective? Like, in running, this is the result, these are the numbers, this person wins. But
Yeah.
in fitness, it's like sometimes more softer look is in trend, sometimes leaner look is in trend. So, and it also depends what kind of other women are standing next to me because it's comparison. I don't know. Is it the same in horse riding? Is it more like subjective or
It it does
objective?
dep Yeah, it does depend on the discipline. So for example, dressage is completely subjective. You're being judged, you're being judged on your performance. Whereas show jumping is more like a race, is how quickly you can get around the course and not knock any poles down. So there are like, it does depend what discipline you're doing. But again, it's that whole concept of not knowing who you're going to be up against. You could go to a competition, you might be like one of a couple of riders, and you come away with a great result.
Mm,
And then you could be in another time you could be in a really big class, and, not do too badly, but feel like you've done terribly.
mm. So how has it been for you? How have you felt like during competitions that's like more durable or more awesome?
Yeah, so I think that I where do I see myself in this? So I love to compete. I
Mm,
definitely love to compete, but I love to compete for the journey. For me, it's not about winning the rosettes. Now, don't get me wrong, like, winning the rosettes are nice, and everybody, loves to have those, and you put them on your horse and you hang them up. And of course, in 10 years time, I would love to win some titles, whether that's at regional level or whether that's at a national level, if it's ever possible,
Mm.
and I'd absolutely love to do that. um but I do see competition as part of that process,
Mm.
both for yourself as the rider and also the horse as well. And I think there are, obviously professional riders who will, who make it their career in competition. That isn't going to be me, but I do like competing, and I think it can be quite nerve-wracking. And I think one of the biggest things that a lot of riders struggle with is remembering to breathe,
Oh,
because your breath work really affects your body in terms of like the amount of tension and stiffness you've got in,
wow.
when you're riding.
So I also like including breath work into practice. Wow, it's like it's all coming together, all these different
Yeah,
pieces. It's like
it is, isn't it? It's
the
funny how
physical,
there's
yeah, the
similarities.
communication with the horse, the physical actual training, adding some strength training, breath work, being mentally tough. And I also, I guess you also need to sleep properly, eat properly to, be healthy all the time. So you can actually have this energy
Yeah,
and willpower to do all this. It's like, wow.
yeah. And I think, the nutrition is something that riders really struggle with when they are competing, because at the end of the day, like the horse comes first, and there's so much preparation that goes into the horse, both before the competition and after the competition. And so you find yourself hardly having any time to eat properly. And then you go away to these shows and there's literally like burger and chips, you know? So unless you're prepared and you take
Wow.
something, there's never going to be a healthy option. And
Wow.
and I think that's also a real challenge as well.
Hmm. So, and you are actually doing something to eat better and you are prepared after the competitions and races.
Yeah, I mean, I have that respect for my body, and
Hmm.
I don't like eating harmful foods.
Hmm.
I'm also a celiac, so having a gluten-free diet is essential for me, and I understand that, whenever there are like these takeaway places, there's always the risk of cross-contamination, which I'm really
Hmm.
sensitive to. And
Yeah.
the gluten-free offering is usually really poor, if there is any
Hmm.
at all. So I always like to take my own food that I know is going to be really good for me. And I know
Hmm.
that I can, feel fueled. I can have something that's maybe quick and easy, but also really nutritious.
Wow. So what would be like your race day meals
Yeah,
before,
so
after?
I love like protein porridge. I
Mhm.
think that's really nice, because especially if you do it like overnight oats, and you can have it with some yogurt, some seeds, like some chia seeds or some hemp seeds, and then some berries or some fruits. And that is like just a really like nutritious just meal in itself, because you've got a good combination of slow release carbohydrates. You've got high protein in there from the protein powder. You've also got, protein and fats in the yogurt, and then you've got the sugars from the berries. So you're kind of getting like a bit of fast release sugars, but
Hmm.
all of the natural healthy ones, as well as, all of those vitamins and minerals that are really important for us.
Wow, yeah. And when you're like talking to other athletes who are doing horse riding, I also like giving them nutrition advice. Or like, what do they feel is like their biggest problem? What do they mostly need help with? What have you noticed?
Yeah. So I think when I'm coaching my clients, one of the the biggest challenges that people come to me with is knowing what to do from a fitness perspective.
Hmm.
And then I completely get that. And you know, I think a lot of people see the fitness as the sexy side of like health. Like everybody wants to like get in shape and look really good. But and I understand that, but I also then try once I'm working with my client, I explore that you can't outtrain a bad diet and you can't
Hmm.
outtrain a lack of sleep, you know, and these things are, and you can't outtrain like really high stress, you know, these are all of these things that are affecting your body, sometimes at a really major level. And so it's about getting those under control as well in order
Hmm.
to like optimize your training off the horse. And then
Hmm.
also you just feel so much better in yourself. Like you show up better for your kids, your family, your partner,
Hmm.
you show up better for work, you show up better for your horses because you're going there to ride and you're not feeling stressed, or you're showing up there with like a good amount of energy and you're not feeling tired. So there's lots of, I think there's lots of nuances, and depending on what type of rider that I'm working with, they can
Hmm.
have very different needs.
Wow. So yeah, that's very interesting. It's like there are like so many different types and so many things to think about. It's like so. And what do you actually like provide them? You talk to them and you also like create them like some kind of fitness plan, some kind of nutrition guidelines, or how does it work?
Yeah, pretty much that. So it's all online coaching. So I
Mhm.
coach riders and equestrians all over the world. I've got
Wow.
clients in North America, whether that's like Canada, the US.
Mm.
I've got clients in Northern Europe, here in the UK, Central Europe. I've also worked as well with clients in the Southern Hemisphere, like Australia, South Africa, and then also the Middle East. And that's the beauty, I think, of the virtual online space. Um, and so all of my coaching is done usually like through Zoom or Google Meet. And we have like weekly one-to-ones where we really get a chance to figure out, you know, what are those roadblocks? What is it that's getting in the way of that person getting the success that they need in the saddle, or getting the
Mm.
success that they need in their health and their fitness?
Mhm.
And then we're unpacking all of those issues, and then we're like combining that then with, you know, the guided exercises and the videos to show the different styles of exercises that we can do, and where to find some good yoga videos or where to find some
Mm.
good Pilates videos, and then tailoring that for the client as well, because a lot of people are scared to go to the gym, and I
Mm.
completely get that. A lot of people have gym anxiety, and so actually a lot of people prefer to work out at home, and then
Mhm.
it's modifying and finding what is it that's going to work for that person. So have they got like some small weights or dumbbells or some resistance bands, and putting that
Mm.
together for them. And then again, you know, exploring like the nutrition and figuring out. I like to give clients a lot of I like to empower clients and put the responsibility on them to actually find the foods that they love, but then understand, you know, how they can figure out what they're eating and manage that themselves. Because I think giving people nutrition plans can be sometimes quite rigid and then difficult to maintain long term. Whereas if
Mm.
you just give people that knowledge in the first place to make those informed decisions, they will do
Mm.
much better long term.
Yeah, I totally agree because you give responsibility to these people, and everybody is responsible for their own health, and this sticks to them actually. It's like the other person because they can just at some point maybe they're not no longer in your life, but you will be with yourself like your whole life. So if you're like in a good relationship with yourself and you're responsible, I think it's good. You said like you work like globally. So do you like also notice any differences between the different equestrians all around the world? Do they have like different needs or like something?
That's an interesting question.
Hmm. So I don't know if they, of course, they had like different kind of food available, but in
Yeah.
terms of, I don't know, the mindset maybe, or is it like, okay, everybody is somewhere in the world and they all have something in common in
Yeah.
the mind, for example.
I think you see, I've been fortunate enough to work with both riders who don't have much of a mindset problem and riders
Mm-hmm.
who do really struggle with mindset. I think what I realize is that actually we are not that different. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter where you are in the world. I think riders will share a lot of the same pains and a lot of the same struggles. You know, you can have riders who are struggling with their nutrition in the US, and you can have those riders as well in Europe. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
riders who want to lose weight, for example. I love working with um, equestrians who are going on a weight loss transformation because that is going to have such a huge impact on them long term in terms of their long term health, but also it's going to be so much better for their horse riding, and much easier for the horse as well to support the rider because you don't weigh as much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing about weight loss transformation as well is that people can see the results, and so and quite often, like, yes, weight doesn't just fall off you, but you the client can see that and get a lot of reward and satisfaction out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas sometimes when you're like just trying to improve your horse riding through your fitness alone, especially if you're really, really experienced, you know, it could take maybe 6 months before you start to notice a difference, but
Mm-hmm.
that difference will be happening. It will just be much more gradual.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, that's so cool. So, for example, if somebody also wanted your help, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm just Karzan Hughes at Karzan Hughes. You can
Mhm.
also find me on Facebook, which is Karzan Hughes Equestrian. And I recently challenged myself to post more on TikTok.
Oh,
So I'm currently doing a daily TikTok at the moment. So
wow, that is quite good. So, I like posting videos with horses.
yeah, there's horse riding stuff on there. There's the health and the fitness stuff, which is really what I'm passionate about, and just giving value to people. And I think just, you know what, like, helping people become the best version of themselves and becoming the best
Mhm.
riders that they were born to be. One area that I really would love to go into is my own podcast, hopefully, and my
Oh,
own YouTube channel as well one day.
yeah.
But you know, these things take time, don't they? There's like so much that you can
You
get
know,
yourself
just
into.
start somewhere like we did here, and it's all
Yeah,
possible.
exactly.
So I think you will be wonderful on YouTube and podcast because you have like so many things to tell, and I can see in your eyes you're like also quite
Thank,
passionate about all this. So it's very nice to see. It's like yeah,
yeah,
and
I think,
you have so different kind of perspective. It's like wow, it's like things that you never think about even.
yeah, I mean, there's always like, you know, occasionally every now and again you will get like a comment on your Instagram or something, and somebody will say like the horse is doing all the work, and it's like it couldn't be any further from the truth.
So maybe this is something that you can actually like, tell people and
Yeah,
explain. No, it's not just a horse. And,
but
also explain the role of the horse back riding, the person on the horse and what they actually need to do to be better. So I never knew that side of sport. It was like, wow, I'm so happy that I talked to you and got to know also like a new perspective. It's like,
yeah, likewise. It's been great actually, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity because it's
hmm,
something that I am so passionate about. And
hmm,
so if you have any listeners who are horse riders, or you know what, anybody who, you don't even have to be a horse rider to work with me. If you're like keen on on finding that holistic health and having that variety of exercise
Mm-hmm.
that really serves you and makes you feel good about yourself, then I'm here to help you.
Oh, so good. Okay, thank you so much for this.
You're
So,
welcome.
yeah, I'm gonna stop the recording now, but we don't have to